Okay, so sorry guys for a little bit of technical difficulties, but thank you for being here today. And we have Matthew today who will be presenting. But before we get to all that, I am Jessica with BCID.
And I am Jose Hernandez with United Spinal Association. Jessica's gonna go over some of the ground rules.
Yep, we have the wonderful Brandon here today. Hey, Brandon. He is our ASL interpreter, so you can go ahead and click on him and pin him to your screen. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat or in the Q&A feature. Yep.
Also,
no, go ahead.
Also, if you need closed captioning, we're using a service called Otter AI, and I'm gonna put the link in the chat box.
So really quickly, before we get started and Matthew begins, I think that it is important to mention the role of BCID. Oh, wait 1 second, sorry. Okay, so I think it's important to mention the role that BCID and other disability groups have played in improving the way the city of New York handles emergencies and natural disasters. In 2011, after Hurricane Irene and just before Hurricane Sandy, we were the lead plaintiff in Brooklyn Center for the Independence of the Disabled, ETAL, Mayor Bloomberg, a lawsuit filed by Disability Rights Advocate, or DRA. The lawsuit charged that, and I quote from the DR website here, more than a decade after 9/11, New Yorkers with disabilities continue to face disproportionate risk of catastrophic harm and death during disasters. The federal judge agreed that the city needed to do a better job, and this suit was settled in 2014. Right here on the screen, you can see the fact sheet about major aspects of the agreement, which includes the appointment of a disability coordinator after a disaster, accessibility shelters, and requirement that the city go door to door to assess the needs of people with disabilities. And Matthew's work flows from that settlement. So now we'll go ahead and give it to Matthew.
Alert exclaim. Audio now unmuted.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So my name is Matthew Puvogel. I work for New York City Emergency Management. As Jessica mentioned, the lawsuit, my position actually occurred after that lawsuit. I originally worked as a communication accessibility coordinator, and I worked in that position for about a year. Then I transitioned to Ready New York, which my actual position now is individual preparedness specialist. So specifically, what Jessica talked about, there were 7 MOUs when the lawsuit actually occurred. After that, changes that our office was required to make, again, required accessible shelters and evacuation centers for people with disabilities, adding the appropriate accommodations, also having a communications protocol for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, and also for people who are blind and low vision and other disabilities. In addition to that, there was power, transportation, also a disability panel, where essentially, as you mentioned, the disability coordinator, which was hired, there was 2 of them. They actually, one of those coordinators actually runs a disability panel where many of the protocols and policies usually will go through a panel of disability advocates so they can look and review certain plans. And those were some of the things that, that were put in place from that lawsuit. And since Hurricane Sandy, since that lawsuit, went through, we've been making changes. And I've been at the Office for Emergency Management for about 5 years. And prior to that, I worked at the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. So that's some of the experience that I had before working in emergency management specifically. So give me 1 second. I'm going to open, I have a PowerPoint.
Alert exclaim. PowerPoint slideshow -2020 NY0.
I apologize if you hear my computer speaking. I use a screen reader. I have low vision, so full disclosure, I also use a guide dog to travel throughout the city. Our presentations currently are all through Zoom. Prior to COVID-19, we were doing all presentations in person. If it wasn't a presentation, we were doing involved within community fairs where we would hand out materials. So this first slide is, obviously says our office, and also the presentation. The acronym that our office has for disabilities is Disabilities, Access, and Functional Needs. And specifically that includes disabilities, but access and functional needs can include women who are pregnant, children, older adults, or seniors. So it kind of encompasses a lot of different populations that are quote unquote, I don't like the term vulnerable populations, but those are the populations within that acronym. Prior to that term that we use, we actually were using special needs, which I don't like that term. So our office itself has gone to that acronym. So that's kind of some of the background information about that.
Slide 2 dash.
So what our office does, who we are, specifically New York City Emergency Management, we help New Yorkers before, during, and after emergencies. Now this is through preparedness, education, and response. So what our office, on a daily basis, what our office does, we are a coordinating agency. So we work with many other agencies throughout the city. So since we're moving into winter weather, if there was a winter weather, extreme cold or snow event, we would work with the Department of Sanitation. In addition to other agencies, Department of Education when there's coastal storms, because the shelter system is run by the Department of Education when there is a coastal storm. So there's a couple other agencies. We also work with nonprofits like the Salvation Army and Red Cross. One incident as far as this happened a few years ago, Vision Sales Manor, there was an actual terrorist incident that happened near Vision Sales Manor. And we worked with the Red Cross and Salvation Army to ensure that there was counseling. We actually had a vehicle in front of Vision Sales Manor. So if people needed services, we were there to coordinate. Again, they're the ones that are there at the scene of the emergency, but we're there to help out specifically. So education, our office has multiple programs. We have Ready New York, which is our main outreach campaign for all New Yorkers, including people with disabilities. And that talks about the 3 areas, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. The main guide that we use that is accessible to all New Yorkers is the My Emergency Plan, which you can download from our website, nyc.gov/emergency management. That's that is our main website. For all of our materials, it's nyc.gov/readyny, and that's READYNY. So education, specifically, preparing all New Yorkers about how to, be prepared in advance of an emergency. We have other programs. We have the CERT program that stands for Community Emergency Response Team. And that is actually volunteers, where if you're interested in volunteering, that you can actually go to our website. Volunteers are trained in basic response, and that includes light search and rescue, traffic control, disaster medical operations, and also fire safety. So if you're interested, you can sign up for that. There are cycles of classes throughout the year at our office. And then a couple other preparedness campaigns that we have. There's community preparedness that more brings local leaders together to promote grassroots preparedness and volunteerism. And then finally, partners in preparedness. That's more for businesses and organizations, but that helps prepare staff, services, and also facilities to be prepared for all emergencies. So that's all the education. Response, we disseminate information throughout the city when there is an emergency. So that can happen through our social media. We've sent out information through Facebook, Twitter, all different types of platforms, through our website, nyc.gov/emergency management. This information, some information would include, such as for opening coastal storm shelters or for opening service centers. So for coastal storm shelters, that would be more during hurricane season. But for service centers, that would open if there is a fire, a building collapse, any other emergency where people would need services. And both of these locations are accessible to people with disabilities.
Slide 3.
So this slide talks about, again, this is just kind of an icebreaker. You get everyone thinking, if you had a disability, what do you think some additional steps you would need to take to be prepared for an emergency? So this is a question that we have for the presentation. These are things to think about during the presentation. What I would like to, if you can, probably, save questions or comments towards the end. But this is the main question for this presentation, to think about what additional steps would I need to take to be prepared. Because if you don't think ahead of an emergency, if you plan during the emergency, it's going to be a lot more stressful. You're going to forget information, even maybe medications you take, or even how you're going to evacuate. So it's really important to prepare in advance. If you have a disability, we all have to take additional steps, myself included. Specifically for me, I have a guide dog, like I mentioned previously, and I need to tell him where to go. It's a team, essentially. He has an idea where to go, but I really have to tell him. If a guide dog or service animals travel to a location only one time, they're not really going to know the full way to go. So you have to train them. You have to tell them, okay, this is where we're going, and give those commands to them. So it's really important to practice evacuation. If you're using a service animal, if you're in a wheelchair, any other disability, it's important to practice those routes.
Slide 4 dash personal emergent.
So personal emergency preparedness, there are 3 steps, like I talked about before, the My Emergency Plan. There's 3 sections in this booklet, and you can download again the booklet from nyc.gov/readyny. And the 3 sections are making a plan, gathering supplies, and then staying informed. So again, those 3 sections are making a plan, gathering supplies, and staying informed. If you have all these 3 key areas in place before an emergency, you will be more prepared, and definitely keep you safe when an actual emergency occurs. So again, these are the 3 steps that we're going to talk about in a second.
Slide 5.
So again, the first section, making a plan. So within a plan, there are many things that you can include, but to start, the most important thing is to create a support network. Now, a support network is a network of individuals that you can trust. Each person's support network is going to vary. It's going to be different. So again, per people who maybe they rely on friends, relatives, or family. But in the instance, if maybe you don't have family or friends in the area, in the city, it's important maybe to even reach out to support providers. So maybe thinking of that, or maybe even home attendants. So it's different for each individual, and your needs specifically to what your disability is. Some people with disabilities may need more assistance than others. So it's really important to think, like, what support am I going to need during, and before and during and after an emergency? So thinking that through. Other key things as far as a support network, why you want to have one, is to think in advance of, what is my evacuation plan going to be? How am I going to get out as quickly as possible? In addition to that, again, it's going to be people you can trust, that support network, because if there is a full breakdown of communication, a backup plan, more as a last resort, would be providing a copy of keys to a family member. So that's, or friend, or whoever you feel you can trust. Again, it's who you can trust, because you don't want to be just giving keys to a stranger. Obviously, it's your home, it's your apartment, so you want to be able to trust that individual to help you if there is an emergency. Medication, having all medications written out is really key. And there is an actual section in the My Emergency Plan on page 5, which talks about medical information. Go back a second. As far as within support networks, communication is really key during an emergency, before, during, and after. And for communication, our office, Emergency Management, we recommend at least having 2 contacts. I would recommend having more than that. It's really a good idea to have backups for all areas of preparedness for emergencies. So having a backup plan, if you have those 2 contacts and you can't reach them, you want to have a backup of other people you can reach out to. In addition, it's also important to have out-of-state contacts. So if maybe you have a contact in Florida, Texas, California, or Colorado, definitely a different state or city, what you can do is contact them, and then they can reach out to your contacts in the city to let them know that you are okay, you're safe. So it's almost like a game of playing telephone, relaying that information that, so-and-so is safe and everything is okay. For certain emergencies where you need to evacuate, meeting places are also really key. And that could be for a fire, it could be for a hurricane or coastal storm. Any emergency that you feel that your life's in danger, you want to evacuate and leave as quickly as possible. So going to a meeting place is going to be helpful for family and friends. If you go to that meeting place and everyone's there, you're fine. But if they're not, then it's when you would be reaching out to first responders, those who are going to be helpful, like fire department or the police department during that type of emergency. And a meeting place can vary. You want to have a meeting place that's near and one that's a little bit further away. So if it's near your apartment or building, that's something you want to have. Obviously, it can be you can pick the place. It varies for each individual. So it can be a restaurant, it can be a park that you go to that's accessible, maybe down the block. You want to pick a place that's accessible to you that you know you can get there as quickly as possible. And also relating it to what your disability is, thinking in advance, like, how am I going to get there as quickly as possible? So a meeting place near, but also a meeting place further away is also key. That could be maybe 2 or 3 blocks away from the scene of the emergency, because if there is a fire or if there's a building collapse, you're not going to be able to stay near that location. So you want to have an idea, maybe going a few blocks away. A lot of businesses, organizations, employers will have meeting places, but again, it's also important to think, maybe speaking to them, see like what's the backup location that we're going to meet if that first meeting place is not an option. So communication, again, having at least 2 contacts, having an out-of-state contact, but also communicating during an emergency with first responders. So knowing how you're going to communicate with those first responders. If someone is deaf or hard of hearing, they're going to need to possibly have a communication card on them, or maybe pen and paper, ways they can communicate. So thinking that through, how am I going to communicate if for some reason I don't have my hearing aids or other assistive communication devices? In addition, if someone is blind or low vision, communication is also going to be key, showing them how best to guide the individual, and also, asking where, can you please provide a description of where you're going to be taking me? Because I have low vision myself. If someone grabs me and they don't really give me description of where I'm going, it's a little bit scary sometimes. So those are the things that you want to keep in mind, communicate, even if you're not deaf or blind or low vision or hard of hearing. If you have other disabilities, again, it's really communication, how they can assist you when you are in an emergency. So to go back to medical information, in the My Emergency Plan, there is a section where you can write out your medical information. So if you use durable medical equipment, that could be written in that location too. Also, the prescriptions, dosages, and how often you take them. And having all this written down is really important, especially if you're allergic to certain medications or certain types of things, because during an emergency, you may forget information. So it's important to have everything written in one location. So in addition to that, there's other medical information that you can provide, such as your blood type, emergency doctor contacts, and any other information that you want to share in that section related to medical information.
Slide 6.
So for all emergencies, I've talked about, evacuating specifically coastal storms, fires. Those are like the main ones that you would need to evacuate. But, other emergencies can happen, like building collapse or other types of emergencies. So for that, you want to have an evacuation an evacuation plan in place, specifically if you have a disability. Like I mentioned before, having backup plans. If the first location as far as exits, if you go there, it's blocked, you want to have an idea of what's the other options. So what I would suggest too for evacuating is speaking to your building management and seeing maybe if they can provide a list of the exits, or maybe where the entrances and exits are to, say, the fire escapes or other locations. And thinking too, like, if you need to evacuate, speaking to them to see when is the elevator going to be shut off. It can happen during coastal storm. It can happen during other emergencies. So you want to see when would they be shutting it down, because if you have to evacuate, for people with disabilities, they're going to have to evacuate as quickly as possible. But, elevators, they are going to be shut down with certain emergencies. So that's something to consider. Now, during coastal storm season, which I keep talking about, the coastal storm season is actually from June all the way till the end of November. So we're almost out of coastal storm season. it's been an extremely active season with so many hurricanes throughout the country, and specifically so much that they've even gone to the Greek alphabet for the names of hurricanes. For the city, we are mostly affected from August to October, and that's when Hurricane Sandy happened. Also, when Hurricane Joaquin almost hit the city, barely missed the city. Those actual hurricanes, coastal storms, were in October. So again, the city is going to mostly be vulnerable from August to October. And ways that you can protect yourself if you have a disability is going to our website and or calling 311. There is the Hurricane Evacuation Zone Finder. It is accessible to people with disabilities. What that website does, you can actually type in your address, or if you call 311 and tell them your address, they can tell you which evacuation zone you live in. There are 6 zones throughout the city. Before Hurricane Sandy, it was letters. Now it's numbers, so it's 1 through 6. Zones 1 or 2 are the lower lying areas of the city. They're most vulnerable to storm surge. So areas that would be considered would be like lower Manhattan, Coney Island, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and the Rockaways in Queens. So those were the areas that were mostly affected by Sandy and are the lower lying areas. So the Hurricane Evacuation Zone Finder, it will tell you what zone you live in, but also the closest evacuation center that you can go to. Evacuation centers, there are about 60 of them that are accessible throughout the city. And those evacuation centers, one will travel to them first, and then from there would then go to a shelter. Evacuation centers and shelters are accessible. There are multiple accommodations that they do provide. And I'll list some of them right now. We have a stockpile of medical equipment for those who have to evacuate and don't have, say, their wheelchair or walker canes. That is provided at these shelters. So there's wheelchairs, walkers, canes, crutches, and also refrigerators for medication. Other accommodations that we provide, there is priority for those using electric wheelchairs, scooters, or assistive communication devices. There's a charging station that we give priority to people with disabilities in the shelters. And there are also other locations in the shelters where there's signage in multiple languages and also in Braille. The shelter itself, in addition to those accommodations, there are accommodations for people who are deaf, and that includes video remote interpretation, which is ASL interpretation through tablet. And also there are assistive listening devices for those who are hard of hearing. For people who are blind and low vision, we have accommodations as far as orientation of the shelter, and that is offered through an audio option or through Braille. In addition to that, we have trainings that our office does throughout the year with other city staff, Department of Social Services, and also our CERT Community Emergency Response Team volunteers. So we provided training to them and they would help out within the shelters. We have an actual DAFN, which is Disability Access and Functional Needs Shelter Coordinator, which would be involved with the accommodation requests if someone does come to a shelter with a disability. So those accommodations would be obviously requested, accepted. We would work with the individual. And if there are other incidents, if issues specifically, if it's a case-by-case request, we work with our other partners throughout the city, like I mentioned before, because we're a coordinating office. And we also have an emergency operations center where a lot of the requests would go through. It's virtual right now, but in our office, we actually have a location on the 3rd floor, which is a large room where all city agencies will coordinate with one another. But that's before COVID. Right now, it's more virtual. So those are the accommodations that we do provide. Within the shelters too, we have, there are locations such as a quiet room for people with developmental disabilities. And also in addition to that too, there is a pet-friendly room for those who have pets. Service animals are not going to be separated from the individual. If someone comes into the shelter and they say they have an emotional support animal or a therapy animal, we're still not going to separate them because we want all New Yorkers to stay safe and be welcome at time of emergency. So we're not going to ask for medical documentation specifically. Again, immigration status is not an issue. We're accepting of all New Yorkers during this time. And in addition to that too, it is COVID-19. Obviously still there's, the increase of cases right now, again, the second wave. So our office is working with the Department of Health and other agencies And within the shelter system, if there was an actual coastal storm during COVID or any other emergencies, we have protocols in place, such as offering face coverings to those who don't have them if they were to visit a shelter. In addition to that, too, there's social distancing signage that would be throughout the locations. In addition to that, too, the actual shelters would, allow a minimal amount of people, would be less capacity. And also, in addition to that, too, cleaning would be a priority, working with staff that would follow the requirements from the Department of Health. So those are the things that, we want to follow. Obviously, COVID-19 is very serious. We want to follow, we want to keep the numbers down. So those are things that we've added into the shelter. God forbid, if there was an emergency, COVID-19 and other emergencies, there would be a couple emergencies going on at the same time. So that is why. Transportation is a huge thing, as far as, so I've talked a lot about evacuation centers and knowing your zone as far as what zone you live in. But for all emergencies, transportation is going to be key. So in my emergency plan on page 10, there is a section that talks about transportation. All New Yorkers, especially people with disabilities, we're going to know how we travel on a daily basis, but we want to know what our backup plan is going to be. So backup plan can include, using an accessible wheelchair taxi, maybe Accessoride. Maybe you have a friend or family member that can transport you. If you have a disability parking permit, maybe they can transport you to another location. So it's really thinking like what your next plan is going to be. Backup plan is really important again, because I actually had an incident where I was scheduled to do a presentation in person. And at the time there was an emergency, there was no transit system running. There was, I didn't have options of an accessible wheelchair taxi or other option. So my coworker actually had to transport me to that event. So really, having a backup plan, you may even have to go to like your third option sometimes, but really thinking that through. And, those are important things to think about. For people with disabilities, transportation during coastal storms, there is a program called the Homebound Evacuation Operation. It's called HEO, H-E-O. And that is a last resort transportation option for the city of New York. So if you've contacted your support network, they can't assist you for some reason. Obviously during an emergency, they're just not around or they're not able to get to you. And, there's no other options. You can call 311 and actually request transportation assistance. And according to what your transportation assistance level is, 311 will either route you to an accessible evacuation center or to a hospital if you need extra assistance. So it's not going to take you to an apartment or home or actual residence, but it's going to take you to the either option of the accessible evacuation center or hospital. Again, that program is called the Homebound Evacuation Operation. For people who are living in certain coastal storm zones, they can call that 311 and get transportation assistance during that time.
Has notes. Slide 7 gathers supplies.
So gathering supplies, this is the second section. And before we start with that, I mentioned the making a plan section, just briefly touch upon the different options again. So you want to create a support network. That's the first thing, creating a support network, having communication in mind, also writing down all medical information, having an evacuation plan in place, knowing what your zone is during coastal storms, and having an idea how you're going to get there with transportation, either to your support network or to the accessible evacuation centers or hospital. So those are the options for making a plan. But again, you can include other options in there if you feel, it's going to help you prior to an emergency. Think about other options. You can put them in there in that plan. But again, that's part of the plan. Each person's plan can be a little bit different related to what their disability is, what their needs are specifically. So gathering supplies is the second section of the My Emergency Plan. And this section talks about, if you're going to evacuate or shelter in place. So you want to think, during an evacuation, what supplies would I need? Same for if you're going to shelter in place. Again, what supplies am I going to keep on hand if I have to shelter in place? So the two means of having supplies again are a go bag, which is a go bag, a supply kit going on the go. So that's why it's called go bag. and that's going to be in an accessible location where you can pick it up as quickly as possible. Sheltering in place, that is going to be against supplies you're going to keep in one location, and really you're going to know, when you need to evacuate or shelter in place. So just thinking about what your plan is going to be and what supplies you're going to include.
Slide 8 dash go bags. New.
So a go bag specifically, a go bag is a small bag or a backpack on wheels. So either or, a small backpack or bag on wheels that you can take and go as quickly as possible. The supplies are going to be for about 2 to 3 days. So if you have to travel to your support network or to the accessible evacuation centers, that's what you're going to have supplies for. Again, the shelters, they're there to keep you safe during an emergency, but they're not going to be that comfortable. The little joke that we always tell people is that the shelters are a lifeboat, not a cruise. So you want to pack supplies, you want to have supplies with you, when that does happen. So supplies that you would have in a go bag, they include a bottle of water, snacks that are not going to go bad, such as a granola bar or a power bar. In addition to that, copies of identification cards, so that can be an accessorized identification, Medicaid, Medicare card, again, all copies, birth certificate, passport, marriage license. It's really copies, whatever you want to include. Again, you're going to put in a plastic bag so they do not get damaged. In addition to that, also, you want to have cash and small bills and nothing larger than a $20 bill. And that's in case if there is a power outage, you're not going to be able to access an ATM. So thinking about, how am I going to get money? You want to have money on hand, nothing larger than a $20 bill. In addition to that, other supplies, you'd want to have a first aid kit for all those scratches and cuts and bruises. It's important to have a first aid kit on hand, and also having flashlights and extra batteries. In case there is a power outage again, trying to find your way, you'd have to use a flashlight. So having the flashlights and extra batteries, really important to have on hand. A radio, also extremely important, either a wind-up radio that charges itself or a radio that uses batteries. Those are things you're going to include also. In addition to that, other items you'd include would be a portable phone charger. It's really important to charge that portable phone charger, which I sometimes forget to do. So you want to charge the portable phone charger and then have that in your go bag in case if there is a power outage also. There's some other items that you can include since we're going into winter weather would be, a pair of gloves, a hat, a scarf, those types of things, maybe even a blanket to keep yourself warm. Those are things you may have to use if you have to evacuate, say if there's a fire, because fires do happen a lot during winter weather. So having those extra items more or less winterizing your go bag. And you can have a go bag in multiple locations. So if you're working, if you drive in a car, you can have go bags in those locations also. So again, having supplies on hand, really key. For people with disabilities, some extra supplies, which I'll go to the next slide, sorry.
Slide 9. No.
So for people with disabilities, some items you'd want to include, again, having extra medication, thinking like, what medication am I going to need? Seeing if you can get extra medications, not letting it run to the end. Also, if you are blind or low vision, it's important to have a backup cane. They do break pretty easily. I know this myself. And also having an idea of if your guide dog or service animal is not able to work, your backup's going to have to be your cane. So that's why having an extra cane really important. For those who are deaf or hard of hearing, knowing how you're going to communicate if you don't have hearing aids. So thinking maybe how am I going to communicate? Maybe having communication cards, having other options in your go bag just in case. But if you're able to have a previous set of hearing aids, that's something you can include too. So those are options for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. For people using wheelchairs, having an extra tire inflator and also patches for tires, that's helpful. And then finally, for someone who has a developmental disability, maybe having an extra a pair of headphones and also music to keep calm during an emergency. Like I mentioned before too, in the shelters throughout the city for coastal storms, we do have a quiet room. That's for people who are sensitive to light and noise, but also for those who are, occurring stress, which it is a very stressful time during an emergency.
Slide 10 dash pets and service.
So as I talked about before, everyone in the household is going to have a go bag. Same for if you're sheltering in place, you're going to have supplies. For pets and service animals, a go bag is going to include supplies for them. So again, 2 to 3 days worth of supplies. But a go bag for a pet is going to look like having medical information, veterinary reports in there, having dog food, maybe some extra water, a collar, maybe a carrier if you need it. Because it's obviously I'm talking about service animals here, but pets can be in many forms. The shelters, coastal storm specifically shelters, we accept any legal pet. So that can include obviously other animals besides dogs and cats. We do allow hamsters and gerbils, also snakes, which I'm not a huge fan of, but we do allow them because they are a legal pet. And specifically for those having a go bag, you're going to have supplies for them if you have to go to an evacuation center or to the support network. So these are all the supplies you'd have in a go bag. Related to a emergency support plan, having an emergency supply kit, you would have supplies in there also. For all New Yorkers, we recommend having at least 7 days worth of supplies. It may seem like a lot, but if you're sheltering in one place for a certain amount of time, you may need those supplies. For sheltering in place, an example of that would be winter weather. If there's a blizzard, if you're not able to get out, that would be an emergency where you need to shelter in place and have supplies. Many of the supplies I mentioned for a go bag are also going to be in an emergency supply kit. So that includes water, which we include a gallon of water per person per day. It may seem like a lot of water, but we always recommend also if you have a bathtub to fill your bathtub. So for one individual, it's going to be 7 gallons of water. In addition to that too, having canned food and a manual can opener, that's going to be extremely helpful if there again is no power, if there's a power outage, ways to cook, that's one way you're going to have nutrition to stay safe. In addition, first aid kits, like I mentioned in the go bag, they're going to be a little bit smaller, but in the supply kit, a larger first aid kit, and also having those extra batteries, having flashlights, maybe even flameless candles. They are also helpful for light. We do not recommend regular candles because they do start fires. So having flameless candles, which they do take batteries, having batteries on hand for that too. Other items that you'd want to have would be medical items. If you have any backup medical items, like a wheelchair walker that would be in your apartment or home, that would be, a good option to keep around just in case. And also, for pets and service animals, having enough food for them, having enough food and also supplies, depending what your nutrition is. So those things are going to be included in an emergency supply kit. A go bag, to go back again, a go bag is going to be when you're evacuating. And all New Yorkers are going to have a go bag. If it's a household of 4 individuals, all 4 individuals are going to have a go bag. And also pets and service animals because they are a part of the family. So that's one reason why all are going to have. And also, maybe not everyone in the household has a disability. So again, each person's go bag may vary, as far as supplies. Some people may not need certain supplies. Others, like a person with a disability, they may need certain medications. Having a list of medications in their go bag. If they take certain medications, if they have asthma, having an inhaler. So those are things that are going to be included specifically. And, it can vary. Again, the go bag and the emergency supply kit, the supplies are going to vary. And it's really what you feel is the most important. The go bag is going to be checked at least twice a year because, you may use supplies if there is an emergency or supplies do go bad. So it's important to restock the go bag if you use supplies or in case you feel if the supplies are no longer good.
Slide 11 stay in.
So this slide talks about staying informed. So staying informed, again, we talked the first 2 sections of, again, making a plan and gathering supplies. Staying informed is the last section of the My Emergency Plan. And some of the programs that our office provides is a program called Know Your Zone. That's the first one I'll talk about. There's also Notify NYC. And also there's the Ready NYC app, which is free of charge. So for Know Your Zone, like I mentioned before, that's related to coastal storms. So knowing what zone you live in, being able to take the appropriate preparedness steps, and also knowing the closest evacuation center that has those accommodations, which I mentioned previously. Notify NYC is our free alert program. You may see like the federal federal government has WIA messages. That's for more like flooding and amber alerts, but the city has our own messaging system, which you can sign up for. It's free of charge, where if you're working in one location, you travel to school in another location, you can have up to 5 zip codes where you receive alerts. That could be text messages, can be email addresses, or it could be a landline where you receive a voicemail. The emergencies vary in size, so you can sign up for all types of emergencies. You can opt in and opt out of certain messages. So for myself, when I was traveling to work, I was relying a lot on transportation alerts, especially traveling through Penn Station. So you can, obviously have an information like transit information, also if the transit system is not running. Also, in addition to that too, like other emergencies, if there's a water main break, or even larger emergencies like there may be a coastal storm, or there may be a winter weather emergency. So with those types of emergencies, the app would actually provide tips of how to be prepared. One thing I did mention before, the transit system does for coastal storms and also for winter weather can shut down. So it's really important to have that backup plan of transportation. For coastal storms specifically, it's 6 to 8 hours before the actual hurricane that transit system shuts down. So again, all that information would be provided in that app and the messages. There's also now a free app that we have called Notify NYC, which similar to signing up through our website, nyc.gov, emergency management, or calling 311. You can download the Notify NYC app, which is free, and that also provides the alerts. Alerts are provided in multiple languages. We have information in 13 different languages, and also provided in accessible formats for those who are blind, low vision, and also for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. So there's voiceover for the messages that we provide, and also American Sign Language. In addition to that, we have the Ready NYC app, and that is what I've talked about today, the My Emergency Plan, which talks the 3 sections, again, making a plan, gathering supplies, and staying informed. That's within that app, which you can download free of charge through Apple or Android. And you can actually share your plan with family members and friends. So that allows you to write out your contacts, your meeting places. There's also an option there where you can actually put together a checklist of items that are in your go bag. There's also information about life-sustaining equipment, and that is for power outages. So if someone has a disability and they want to see if they qualify as a life-sustaining equipment customer, they can call Con Edison or PSEG and actually find out if they qualify. And during an actual emergency, the utility companies will call those individuals to check on them. So it's a way you can sign up. The city doesn't have a registry specifically for disabilities, but this is a way that you can sign up for if your power is out and you rely on oxygen, dialysis, any other certain type of equipment, maybe even sleep apnea machines. So that information is also in the app. For power outages specifically, we do tell people to contact the utility department, but also to have a backup battery source, because the actual utility companies may not get to you for a little bit of time if there is an extended power outage. So it's good to have that extra battery on hand that you can obtain. So that's going to be prior to an actual emergency. So that's the stay informed section. And again, our website is nyc.gov/emergency management. You can obtain additional information. The website that we have for Ready New York, again, is nyc.gov/readyny. We have guides in 13 different languages. We also have information in audio format for those who are blind, low vision, and also have developmental disabilities. And, you can create the guide through the app, but also you can download right now the guides from our website. So that's, those are ways that you can stay informed. Specifically, again, the 3 sections, again, making a plan, gathering supplies, staying informed. Those are the 3 key areas that you want to keep in mind. Because people with disabilities, we really need to take additional steps to be prepared. So again, thinking those steps through, like, what am I going to do prior to an emergency? And again, emergencies come in all different forms and sizes. It can be winter weather, it can be a heat wave, which is a very vulnerable time for certain people with disabilities. Also a hurricane. So really any emergency that can happen, you want to be prepared for that. And we think, emergencies don't happen all the time, but they do happen all the time. So it's really important to be prepared and, be informed, have all the things in place I talked about today, so you are prepared when an emergency hits the city. So I am willing to take questions. I'll go to the next slide.
Slide 12 dash question.
So really quickly, Matthew, thank you
Yes.
so much. And I wanted to chime in a little bit,
Sure.
because I have this saying that Jose is very familiar with. I'd rather be a fool that's prepared than an unprepared fool. And COVID was a really big example of that for me. Anytime I saw water on sale or rice on sale or dried beans on sale, because emergency doesn't, yes, it does include obviously getting up and needing to go, but sometimes, like Matthew suggested, hunkering down. So I made sure we had cases of water and rice and beans. Anytime I saw these things on sale, I grabbed them, and I'm continuously using them and rotating them out to replenish my stockpile, so to speak. And I was affected by Hurricane Sandy. I lost water and electricity for just under a week, and thank God, that was a lot better than other people. But that was, and I was also affected by one of the big blackouts. And so those two kind of really helped me prepared for these type of situations, right? Just to kind of have myself better prepared. And my brother's a little bit of an undercover doomsday prepper. So he definitely inspired me as well. But really quickly, I wanted to show you guys, for those of you who can see, I have this massive backpack that I got years ago, that was given by New York, and it had like essentials in here, and I've added to it with the stuff that Matthew suggested. This thing is so daggone heavy.
Well, Jessica, just to cut it also, as far as like your go, and I have one of those go bags too. The state actually, I don't, obviously they're not doing that because of COVID, but they, for a while, they were actually giving out go bags. So I have a go bag that has a lot of supplies in it, but if you're not able to get a go bag, it's really, we tell people to put one together, and it could be small supplies. It doesn't have to be crazy expensive items, but having the small supplies and kind of building it as you go. You can buy certain things at a dollar store, convenience store. You don't have to go crazy. Because I know some places like Amazon and other places, they sell it for a pretty expensive price. So, if you can get one from one of those events, that's great. But if you can't, you really, we tell people to put it together with, supplies kind of as they go.
Yeah, and that's why I added to mine, like Matthew said, I have one of those chargers to charge your phone, and I have a reminder on my phone to charge the charger, just to kind of make sure that it's always at full charge. And something else that I thought is helpful is Mylar blankets that I've thrown in there, and walkie-talkies, because sometimes you never know if your cell phone is going to work in that kind of situation. And anytime that like I get a prescription, sometimes we get an overspill of, or we have extra. I always take a couple of those and put them in one of those pill organizers and throw it in there just to have it. And there was one more thing I wanted to say. But Matthew said it. Of course, like supplies, if you need catheters or whatever, we all know somebody who knows that we get way too much supply sometimes. And that's a good place to throw them in that bag. So that way you have them. And I do have before this presentation, I did have my book, because I've been at other events, my Ready New York book, and they also have I'm sure it's online too, and they have the pet one that Matthew was talking about.
Yeah, so it's online. The booklet's online. There's also the map for the hurricane evacuation centers and the map for the zones. That's also in the My Emergency Plan when we were giving it out, but also it's on our website. So, again, that's one way you can download it. One actual supply, which I forgot to mention, for a go bag, a whistle is actually also really a good tool to have, because we can only yell for so long in certain emergencies. So whistle is also another tool that you should have in your go bag, in addition to, walkie-talkies and other things that are going to be backups. a whistle is really a backup also. Like if you can't contact people and say if you're in your building, it's really, it's a low cost way you can, keep yourself safe also.
Wanted to get to a few of the questions
Sure.
and comments that people have had. First would be, can the PowerPoint presentation be made available to individuals?
Sure, I could send it to them.
Just email it to Jessica or I, and we can distribute that through a follow-up email with everyone.
Yes, and I'm gonna go ahead and include our emails in the chat. So if you want a copy, you can go ahead and send us an email.
And another comment is, does this help individuals in Nassau County, Long Island, or is there such a thing in place for Nassau?
So we work with the 5 boroughs of the city. There are offices in Nassau. I know there's the Nassau Emergency Management. I think their main office is in Bethpage. It's somewhere I know in close to there. So there are different offices for each area, such as Westchester, Nassau County, Suffolk County. Their plans might be, obviously their shelter system and plans, they may be a little different. So for our office, we really work with the 5 boroughs. Not saying we don't work with those other emergency management departments. We may also work with them too when there's a mutual aid, incident where if they need extra help from other agencies, we'll do that too. I know that happened the first year I worked at emergency management, or it might have been second year, where there were many snowstorms actually in Massachusetts. So we worked with the emergency management department there. So it depends as far as that goes. But yeah, we only work at the 5 boroughs, but I know that there are offices in those other areas of New York.
And we have one more question. Jessica, you want to read that one off since it's your friend?
Taka, hi Taka. So if you're my friend Taka, he says, this question is from Matthew. Do you think hurricane season will be moved back or moved forward due to climate change?
Honestly, don't know. I know right now, because we work with National Weather Service, they're the ones that I guess would determine that. Again, like we mentioned before, we coordinate with a lot of agencies and organizations. So usually when there's winter weather, or if there's a heat wave or whatever, like weather related emergency, we work a lot with them. So they usually will provide the weather report for coastal storms. Like I mentioned before, June to November, but really the city is affected August to October. So I don't know if it's going to be moved, but if I'm not going to know, it's probably going to be the National Weather Service. They would be the ones probably to inform us if that's going to happen.
And Joelle made a comment that captioning should be always on in an emergency.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the comment? I didn't hear it again.
Joelle, he says the captioning should be open, always on in an emergency.
Yes, I agree.
Again, I'm going to apologize to Joe because we usually have captioning. We had some technical difficulties, and
It is on, no?
It didn't record anything. Like,
what isn't he talking about, like emergency broadcasting, whatever? Well,
yeah, that's another thing. Yeah.
That, yeah.
We kind of went over time a little bit, but I really want to thank you, Matthew, for doing this presentation. And I really, really encourage everybody to go ahead and make sure whatever you can, it doesn't have to be big things, but always keep a little stash and catch things when they're on sale and use them, because they're things we use every day. And you just want to kind of rotate them to replenish your stash, and just so that you feel safe, because those things can sometimes be scary. And it definitely helps to reduce stress when you're prepared.
It definitely does. And I would say, like, if from this presentation, if you only get a couple things, put a go bag together, have the supplies at home, enough supplies that you can stay safe during an emergency. If you have to evacuate, have that plan, but also sign up for Notify NYC. It's a really good alert system. It's free of charge. It doesn't cost you anything. If you don't have a smartphone, you can sign up through an email or through, even a text message if you have a non-smartphone, or even if you have, a landline, you still can get the messages, so you're informed about all of our emergencies.
Hey, Matthew, really quickly, I'm sorry. One of these things in my booklet also came with a get free emergency alerts. It's like a little booklet thing. And in the back, it says, to visit online, nyc.gov/notify NYC.
That's
Follow on Twitter
Mhm.
at notify NYC. And it also has a call for 311, and
Yep.
it gives a number for video relay and TTY services. Are those still the same?
Those are still the same, yeah. So video relay, I believe it's 212-639-9675, and the other one is I'm forgetting the number, but there is also
Have it. It's
Yeah.
212-504-4115. And I also included it in the chat.
Okay, that's what I thought the number was. I just don't want to give the wrong number out. But yeah, those two numbers are the same for our brochures and also anything on our website. There
I
is
also,
there is also a section on our website within Ready New York that is specifically for people with disabilities. A lot of the things I talked about today is in that section on our website.
and I added that web link to the chat. It's a guide and app. I also downloaded the NYC Ready app, and it is actually really good to help you set up a go bag and get your contacts in order. So it's a really good app if you have a smartphone. So again, if there aren't any more questions, I want to thank Matthew for giving this presentation, Brendan for giving us our wonderful ASL, and tell everyone goodbye and have a safe.
Thank you, Matthew.
You're welcome. No problem. Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having me today.
Brandon.
Have a safe holiday and
You too. Yeah, everyone have a safe holiday.
bye.
Bye.
Tasks with meeting controls. Meeting control F3.